Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the PM Learning Series. My name is Shivi. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn and host of today's show. Please introduce yourself, drop in the chat where you're joining us from. As many of you know, the PM Learning Series is a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and product practitioners share their career journeys and best lessons learned about building products to inspire current and aspiring product builders like you to level up your product career and build better products for your team and your company. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter in the details tab of the event to receive recaps of key takeaways from today's event, as well as future event updates. I do see that we get some spammers today, at least 2 or 3 of them. Mary, Helen, and Priya, who I reported earlier. So folks, don't be fooled. Apologize for, seeing so many spammers, but that's just a sign for how popular this show has become and also how honored I am to talk to my guest today, Justin. Thank you, Justin, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Shabi. I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you. So Justin is a product and analytics thought leader with experience scaling early stage startups who believes that personalization starts with great data. Currently, Justin serves as the Chief Product Officer at Amplitude, a leading digital analytics platform. At Amplitude, Justin builds robust product-led teams that develop deep customer understanding and strives to streamline data-driven decision-making. So much juice and jam there. I can't wait to unpack some of that, Justin. And you are a 2-time entrepreneur as well as alumnus of McKinsey, Stanford Graduate School of Business, and Colleton College. Well, Justin, before we start, I just want to say that I'm really, really excited to talk to you today because I think Amplitude has been such a great company that puts out a lot of thought leadership assets, playbook that contribute, to the global community. And there's so many thought leaders working, at the company to help contribute to that collective knowledge building as well. So earlier in our episode last year, we had the honor of talking to Elena Verna, who's the head of growth at Amplitude. And it was one of the most loved episodes from the community. So it's great to have you here today. And we're diving into, building product with analytics. Later, actually, in a couple of weeks, I haven't listed events. We'll be speaking to Adam Greco and John Collar, who's now an alumnus of Amplitude, but really, really great work all around from you and the Amplitude team and all the thought leadership you guys are putting out there. So really excited.
I appreciate that.
Awesome. Let's say hi to some folks from LinkedIn. Folks, again, please introduce yourself. I'm still seeing a lot of spam, but we're seeing some LinkedIn users from Tuscan, from Houston, Texas. We'll give it a couple minutes for folks to introduce themselves. Usually we get a global crowd of folks, but I think Mary Beth is bombing our feed right now. Apologize for that. And let me see if I could report that. All right. But yes, folks, if you have questions for Justin, please drop them in the chat. And maybe, Justin, let's travel down the memory lane a little bit. And if you could, just tell us a little bit about your journey into product and what got you specifically interested in the analytics and data space.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I find most product leaders come from very different backgrounds, and many of them don't start in product, myself included. I actually started my career in analytics and data science. Originally I was an econometrician, and then was thinking about what I want to do there, going to academia, and actually decided to apply those analytic skill sets to the world of business. You mentioned that I went to business school in McKinsey. It was McKinsey actually where I started my path into product, which is a pretty non-traditional way of getting into product management, but was doing a bunch of work in the pricing space, and a partner I was working with actually came up with the idea we could maybe turn the research I'd done into a product, which we actually did. And so I was the PM who actually built out that software. I think I can lay claim to maybe being the very first PM at McKinsey. That company still exists. It's called Periscope Pricing. And that really turned my eyes to the power of product, the fact that we could create so much impact through building technology that empowers people in this situation to do their job better. That's why I love B2B SaaS, because it's all about serving our customers and helping them accomplish their goals. And so I've done a lot of different products, both in the B2C space and then most recently over the past 7 years leading products at Amplitude.
Yeah, I love that. The dots, you only, the dots are only connecting when you look backwards. So I can definitely see how you marrying your love for analytics, data science, work in McKinsey, pricing, everything, and product, obviously. And Amplitude is this baby that you nurture. And I can see how that all connected together. And I just want to say hi to a couple folks from all around the world. We have folks from India, from Cleveland, Jessica, Barcelona, from Victoria, Jonava from London, Minnesota, Seattle. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of passion for learning more about analytics. All right. So without further ado, let's dive in, Justin. So during my intro, I also mentioned that, Amplitude, you help build using product-led growth strategies and, build teams and that help them embrace deep customer understanding, right? Can you give us maybe a couple examples of how Amplitude, help customer use their data to create like innovative products that their users love and help them build better products?
For sure. Yeah. It's obviously why we exist. And I found there's a couple different ways that our customers tend to use data. I can actually maybe even share a couple examples from Amplitude of how we've done it. The first is around a hypothesis generation. So an insight that actually leads towards a new idea or concept that you then go further build and test. And then the second is actually more around optimization of the experience. You already have something that you've started, but you're trying to improve it. Both are very, very important. An example from Amplitude on the hypothesis generation side. So I remember in the very early days, we started to see some of our customers sending in experimentation data into Amplitude. And we actually weren't quite sure why they would do that. Like we weren't an experimentation product. But we saw the data, we start to dig in with customers and we actually learned and saw what they're doing. And they're actually doing a lot of deeper analysis and tying experimentation data to downstream things like retention and engagement. When we talked to them, we discovered that they actually used Amplitude analytics to figure out when a test failed, like why did it fail? And we asked them, like, why weren't you doing this in experimentation product? And we kind of uncovered that actually you really needed to have an integrated experimentation analytics workflow to fully solve that. And by having two standalone products that didn't really accomplish that job, we started building out some tests around that. And eventually ended up launching our own experimentation product. And that's seen a ton of success within the market. And so I think that was an example of how, early analysts of the data started to get us thinking about what could be possible. And then on the other side, on like, how do you optimize using data? I mean, that literally every single thing we work on, we have that. Every single feature we work on, it starts from a hypothesis and starts from a set of metrics that we're going to use to measure whether or not we got the solution right. And we use those to figure out like, okay, are we actually seeing retention of that feature? We're digging into the data. In many cases, we'll find that actually it's not what we expected, in which case then we'll dig in further. We'll do another iteration of it. Maybe we'll choose not to push that forward until we get to a point where we feel like the feature actually is delivering a lot of value to our customers, which gets reflected in the data. And so those are at least a couple of the ways that we at Amplitude use that, and our customers do the same.
I love how you basically build your product, dog fooding it, and also learning from your own data from the customer. So I love those examples. Well, I know this might sound obvious, but a talk about data and analytics is, incomplete if we don't talk about how to measure success and key metrics and how we define KPIs. What would you say are some of the best strategy as well as common pitfalls when it comes to, companies thinking about how to measure success of a product, a feature? Do you have like a playbook or go-to framework for how Amplitude defines success?
Yeah, we definitely do. We actually literally wrote a book on it called the North Star Playbook. And so we use that framework at Amplitude. Every single product, pillar, pod, which is kind of how we organize our teams, they have their equivalent North Star metric, kind of what is what is the single thing that they really reflects customer value and business impact. And then they also have their leading indicators of that. We call that the constellation of metrics. And then also have their check metrics, which we call SOOs at Amplitude. And so all of those serve as kind of the metric side of understanding, are we delivering value to our customers? In terms of some of the common pitfalls, one is actually too many metrics. So teams will just drown in data. They don't know what's the most important thing to drive. That was why we really invested in building out the North Star metric framework. We found that one of the big power of metrics is that it aligns an organization. It's a signal of what you are driving, of what the kind of value you want to create. And actually having that conversation to get down to a single metric, that's actually not a data conversation at first. That's a strategy conversation because you'll find that people aren't aligned. And that's a really powerful discussion to have, because if you're not aligned, then you're certainly not going to be able to build a great product. And so we've helped a number of customers in that pathway. And that's why we built out the playbook. And if people are interested, definitely suggest checking that out. Another pitfall I've seen is not continuously evaluating your metrics. So your metrics do change over time as your customer base changes, as your strategy changes. And so something that might have been a key driver for you at one point in time may not be if you have a big strategy shift. I think sometimes people they forget that, classic OKR is an example. Like, it's objective and then key result. It's not KRO, right? You need to think about what your strategy is. And so if your strategy shifts, then your metrics should probably shift with that. So always being able to evaluate that. They go in tandem. And so those are at least a couple of things I've worked with a number of our customers on bringing into their organization.
Yeah, I love the North Star playbook as well. I think it's a really, it gives you step-by-step action item to think about how to define metrics, and love the continuous iteration and evolution, especially tying it to a strategy that's also being evolved. We do have 2 questions to follow up from the community. One question I want to ask from Siddharth, but I would reframe it a little differently. I think it's, how do you suggest teams to work in a qualitative way, taking into customer feedback sometimes that might not show up in the metrics, right? And then supported then by the qualitative approach to looking at metrics. How do you think about the co-quam balance? And
it's a great question, because I think it really is art and science to building product, right? I think for us, we're really trying to push the science as Amplitude, but we recognize that there's both, and you really need to have both work together. And so the example of customer feedback, like as a product leader, you spend a lot of time with your customers. That's critically important. And not every single piece of feedback is going to get reflected through the data. What I have found, though, is that actually once you get feedback from customers, that can help you start to look in the data to see how many other customers might have that similar issue. So you can start to build some more confidence behind that being a key problem for you, and then figure out if that's something that you want to improve. I think the other way is, I mentioned we have this concept of SOOs. And so we call those standard operating objectives. Those are actually metrics that we're currently not trying to improve, but we're constantly monitoring them, because if we see a drop in those metrics, then we'll actually stop all the work that we're doing on the strategy side to ensure that we actually address that. And so a lot of times that's how we capture that customer feedback. Those things that they're the small paper cuts that build up over time, those will end up causing a drop within your SOOs. And so we have ways to kind of make sure we're reflecting that. And then we really empower the team to say, hey, stop your feature work if your SOOs have dropped. Go figure out why. We got to make sure that we're always delivering to our existing customers versus thinking about just creating new value. And so our SOOs help us make sure we have that right balance.
That's awesome. I love how you lay that out, the SOO, and having, both of the approach to find the balance, the arts and science in between. I wanted to ask another follow-up question before we dive into more org building capabilities. Sometimes we want to use data, especially to understand our retention and the reasons behind why customer churn. Sometimes people churn voluntarily, sometimes not. How do you how do you use data to understand about the reason behind their churn, to get more intel around that, and then devise strategy around bringing them back?
Yes. Yeah. Great question. I mean, especially in today's environment, critically important that we're retaining customers. We actually have another playbook called the retention playbook, which lays out a whole bunch of strategies that customers or that folks can use to actually understand retention. I can highlight a couple of the things there. The first is that you kind of highlight there's different types of churn and different ways to think about how you retain users. So we suggest that our customers think about retention both from a new user perspective, so folks who are brand new into your product, and are you able to get them to come back the first time and get them to that aha moment, that habit formation. There's a whole set of strategies there. There's also a set of users who've gotten to that habit. Are you getting them to continue to come back and convert to power users? We call that current user retention. And so there's different tactics you might want to do there. And then the last piece is folks who maybe have gotten to that and then fallen off. And so we call that resurrected user retention. How do you take a dormant user and bring them back? And all of them have different tactics that you can use. An example of that is, let's say, if you're focused on resurrection of users, one of the most common things that you can do is actually look at those users, figure out why they dropped off in your data, cohort them. And let's say it's like some feature they were frustrated with or it didn't exist, and you've actually made an improvement or built out that feature. You might then actually send them a notification letting them know that you appreciated the feedback or you saw that they had a challenge with this and we've actually made big improvements, and try to bring them back in, and then have a very specific approach to how you're going to reactivate those users. They're very different than a new user. And I find that's something that a lot of times people don't think about. What is that resurrected user's experience? I've seen some products where they'll come back and then they get bombarded with a whole bunch of new user retention techniques, all these different pop-ups, and they don't need to know that. They've already used the product. It's actually quite annoying to them. But think about what should their experience be as someone who's already previously used the product. And data can help you figure out what's the right way to personalize that for a resurrected user.
Yeah, I love that. I love the not treating every user the same and using data to be smart about it. Are they net new user that should be going through brand onboarding, or people who are about to churn and need some more continuous onboarding, and resurrecting users, like you said, that who have maybe need a little reminder of what the value of the product. I like to transition the second half of our talk more into sort of high level strategy and org analytic capability building. So, obviously a lot of companies probably approaching Amplitude for help to be able to scale, the growth of their analytic capabilities and building this culture for experimentation. What's your advice for how company can maybe start from a product team and then scale it to the entire org to embrace this practice and new capability? But also, how would you advise company maybe at different stage, or having different type of business model to leverage analytics better, especially if companies start with a digital core, like they have always been a tech company? Maybe it's easier for them to do. But what about companies that are more mature, maybe more in a traditional industry, that they want to be smarter using data as well? What's your advice for those company at different stage, different business models?
Yeah, for sure. So there are different levels of maturity in terms of how to use data to drive decision making. I think if you're in a startup, a lot of times it's a little easier because honestly, it's just easier to build culture because you're creating it as you go. Whereas at a company that's maybe a traditional enterprise, non-tech organization starting to build out tech for the first time, it can be a little different. So the first is kind of understanding where you're at in that maturity. Is this a company that embraces the concepts around failure, around taking risks, on using data to help you uncover future value? Or are you more a traditional kind of top-down oriented culture? As you mentioned, John Cutler, he talks about the feature factory. Is that kind of what tech is seen as, just in service of the business to drive out more and more features? You kind of need to understand where you're at within that those different maturities to figure out then what's the right approach. But I'll take the example of the kind of traditional non-tech, because that's one that I spend a lot of time with customers who are in those situations. And that's a big change management approach that you need to take. And so the way you do that is you got to have a combo of top-down and bottom-up. So from a top-down perspective, you got to have someone who's really sponsoring that. And so if you are a leader, then that can be yourself, which is great. If you're someone who's maybe an IC in an organization, like figure out who's someone that can help you really start to push the wins that you're going to get from the top. That's going to be really important. And then figure out what's the best place where you can start the practice, right? It's not about changing overnight. It's about demonstrating progress towards a more data-driven approach. And so figure out a good spot where you can actually do that, where you can have some appetite to fail. This typically tends to be places where you can ship really fast. And so it may not be your main product, your legacy product. It might be, maybe it's a new product, or it's a growth team that just started. Some place where you can start to showcase wins of how data helped you optimize and improve. And then once you start to create those wins, what I have found is that other teams see that and they want to emulate that. And now you're starting to get pull into other parts of the organization. And then you can start to build out centers of excellence around that. These are things we help our customers with. We actually have professional services to help build this out. Certainly, yeah, reach out to Amplitude if this is something you'd love to learn more about. But that's kind of the approach that I typically suggest for companies who are earlier in this data-driven methodology.
I love that. Top down, bottoms up, getting a sponsor, get some quick wins, make other teams FOMO that they want to learn more about it and jump ship, right? I my former life was working as a consultant in many capacity, helping companies build this kind of capabilities. I definitely resonate with what you said. I wanted to dive into maybe this question from Ashley about tips on incorporating data for, at a startup, which are probably maybe like pre-PMF phase. How should they be thinking about data? Should they be using a solution like Amplitude, where there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of things are assumed, they're not validated? How do you approach, using a data solution?
That's great. Yeah. So in the case where you're pre-launch, a product doesn't exist, you're going to be more focused on identifying, validating hypotheses that you have. And data is a great way to do that. Like, you have hypotheses as to how are you going to ultimately get to product market fit, right? You believe you understand the customer problem. You've got solutions you're about to launch. How are you actually going to see if those are resonating with your customers? And that's where you're going to start to use data. And so honestly, before you launch, it's probably the most important time to start building out that North Star metric, the constellation of metrics that match to the hypotheses that you have. Because your job, once you launch, is to figure out what resonates with customers and what doesn't. Guaranteed, some of the things that you release are not going to resonate with your customers. You got to figure out which of those aren't, stop working on those, figure out the ones that are, where they do have high engagement, lead to retention, double down on that. And so data is a critically important part of that process. It's not the only one. You're going to talk to customers, obviously. You want to do both, but the data will help you start to figure out that stuff at scale and start to get that feedback a lot faster.
That's awesome. Thank you. Using data as a signal to prioritize getting, doing more research and double down on the area that gains traction. So I know this question might be a little broad, but Justin, you can figure out whether you want to answer in a generic way or, pare it down to a specific domain. But, product-led growth right now is being talked a lot about. How do you see companies winning in this product-led growth era, and what strategies specifically do you recommend company to pursue to maximize their odds for success?
That's great. Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of product-led growth. Obviously, as a products leader, really what it is saying is you're going to use your product to drive your business, which at the end of the day, and take B2B SaaS, that's why they have a relationship with you. It's because of the product. They want to use the technology to ultimately be able to accomplish their goals. And so what we're doing is we're putting the product front and center versus them having to learn through it through a sales interaction or a marketing interaction. They can actually just try out the product. I love it. It's great. What it does, though, is it really puts a lot of emphasis on that product experience. You need to have a bulletproof product experience because that is going to be their first interaction with you. And the best way to do that is to be constantly iterating and improving on your product. So something I personally believe is that actually the biggest competitive differentiator in this century will be how quickly you can go from data to insight to action. what we talked about. Identify what's working, what's not working, testing and learning, right? If you can adapt that faster than your competition, I guarantee you'll build a better product. And in a product-led era, that is the most important driver of success, is that product. And then once you have that going, you've got a great product experience, you've got product market fit, you're delivering value to customers, then it's now time to start thinking about how can you use your product to actually drive acquisition of your customers. And that's one of the other big powers of product-led growth. Thinking about what are your growth loops? What are the ways that through the product experience, you can actually acquire more customers because of how they're using the existing product. Continue to reduce friction. Like all this, I think, leads towards a healthier product. And it's something I'm really excited about. And something obviously that, we build a lot of our product to help empower for our customers.
Yeah, I love the power of product-led growth, mostly in the sense of it's atomic and it can then start to build that network effect. So more and more people are using it, and how you grow like Slack. And I particularly like the data insight action feedback loop and how you get really, really good at it. And that's how you win. I think if I were to summarize the key takeaway personally for me from your response. Right now, I think we are in a very challenging macro environment, right? With a lot of uncertainties, massive tech layoffs. And, what's your advice for companies, whether startups or mature companies, trying to navigate, this very uncertain macro environment? How do you use data to kind of increase your confidence and conviction in going down a certain path to continue to, improve their product and survive and thrive in the next era with a lot of, explosion of AI and a lot of changes, a lot of uncertainties?
For sure. Well, I think in this era, it's more important than ever to think about how do you sustainably grow. I think in the past, when cash was practically free, like you could take lots of risks. And honestly, I think we developed a lot of bad practices around ensuring that the things we're working on actually are delivering value to customers. So it's really, really important that everything you're working on, right, is delivering value. The first thing is focus on retention. You got to keep your existing customers. It's way more expensive to acquire new customers than it is to actually retain existing ones. And so we talked about that and how that needs to be a critical part of your strategy. And then the second thing is, like I said, evaluating your hypotheses. I think it is a good time to be investing in growth, but do it in a sustainable way. So have a hypothesis, test it, learn, right? It might be in this era, you can't take as many shots on goal. It's just, don't have as many people to do it. You don't have as many resources. And so you got to figure out faster whether what you're working on is actually going to deliver value. And so that's the power of data. Once again, it's a great way to get that feedback at scale as to, is this something that customers are using? And so we're doing the same thing, ensuring that we're actually, everything that we launch, we have clear goals around it. We've got survival metrics, like should we be investing further here? And certain things we're doubling down on, certain things we're actually shutting them down because the opportunity cost is so much higher now. And so we got to make sure the things that we're working on right, but we still want to take risk. It's just about shortening that time. And so maybe something's not going to be able to run for 6 months or 12 months. And maybe we need to see in 3 months, what's the leading indicators that we can get in a short period of time to give us confidence that we should continue to invest.
I love the mention of both leading indicator, where you just said, so that you get shortening that feedback loop between data, insight, action, but also the survival metric. I feel like it's so important, especially in this era, like you said, because, as product manager, sometimes there's emotional costs and sunk costs, and as development teams associated with things that you consider as your baby. But it's better to adopt the mindset of an iterator and cut it short, embrace failure, than trying to stick to it and pivot, pivot if it's the right signal, versus trying to stick around and make it work, and even knowing that it might not work. So I like that. I would like to ask you one last question around, I sort of alluded to a little bit around the explosion of generative AI, but what would you say are some of the latest trends, particularly in the product analytics space, and how do you think that's going to impact product development?
Yeah. So I think one we've talked about, which is the fact that product is becoming the growth driver for every business. What that means is that every team at your company will need access to product data to do their job better, because now everyone's job is actually helping improve the product experience, because that's how you interact with your customers. And so I think one of the shifts we'll see within the product analytics space is actually more not just PMs using product analytics, but we're going to see marketers, customer facing teams, and they're going to want to bring their data. And so you're actually going to start to see people bringing the traditional acquisition data and connect that to product data, or business data, connect that to product data to get that full end-to-end journey of the customer experience. So I think that's a key trend. I actually am a huge fan of this. I think we're going to have tighter alignment around goals within an entire organization as everyone's focused on building for the product. I think a second trend is where data resides. So we're starting to see a lot of it starting to reside within the data warehouse, seeing centralization of customer data there because it's so valuable. But there's a huge challenge because it's difficult to access that data. It requires SQL. And so I think it's going to be more and more important for, as I said, marketers, PMs, business folks, people who maybe don't have an analytics background to be able to access that to do their job better. And then I think the third is starting to use data, not just for analysis, but really activating it in the product experience. We talked about how important it is to really customize, personalize the experience for individual users based on their prior behavior. And I think in the past, that was something that only highly technical teams could do. Which is why we're investing in more low-code, no-code ways that you can start to take advantage of machine learning, AI techniques, and bring that into your product experience to deliver a better experience to your customers.
My dream feature, if it exists or Amplitude's going to build it, is going to be Chat GPT bot for analytics within an organization. I have so many questions all the time, and my data scientists are some of the most, precious resource, and I always crunch on time. So imagine if I could ask questions and then the data would just come back, like showing the insight. We will all become better product manager, marketer. And I love the integrated, approach across all parts of the business, right? Not just product and silo, but across sales, marketing. All right, we're coming up in time. So Justin, we usually conclude our session by asking a round of lightning question. Are you up for the challenge?
That sounds great.
All right, drum roll. So first question, what is your favorite product currently? Maybe besides Amplitude.
Yeah, exactly. So besides that, so actually one thing that I love using, it's actually Aura. You can see the ring right here. And what I love about it's data leading to behavior change. So it's how literally is data to insight to action. I can see the impact of me staying up late or eating late, not having good habits, how that's impacting my sleep quality. And so that's actually influenced me to stop doing those things. And so literally I'm improving my own health through the use of data. So I think that's a great product that I enjoy using.
I love that. You're leaving walk your talk. So awesome. Second, who would you consider is your product role model that has been most influential in your product career?
I mean, I've been lucky enough to have a number of folks that I've gotten the opportunity to work with. We talked about Elena Verna and John Cutler and Adam Greco, even at Amplitude. But certainly I think one of my mentors, great mentor to me, is the CPO at Atlassian, Joff Redfern. I think he's someone that I've learned a lot from over the years. But like I said, there's so many great product leaders out there. It's an amazing time to be learning product.
That's awesome. One final question. What is a parting advice or resource you like to share with our community?
We've already actually talked about two of them. So our North Star playbook and our retention playbook. I think the great thing about that is these things are not marketingware. They're literally written by practitioners. And so I would highly suggest that people actually take a look at them. A number of our customers tell us they make it required reading for anyone who joins their team. And we make it free for everyone because it's just part of us fulfilling our mission of helping companies build better products through data. We're trying to help the overall industry. And those are a couple ways that I think everyone can start to learn how to use data within their day-to-day lives.
That's awesome. I'll definitely make sure we include it in the newsletter that go out on Wednesday. So folks, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you go to the details page and subscribe so that you can get a recap of all the great things that Justin have said. I think it really resonated with the community as well. Everyone's saying this is a great session, from a lot of folks. So thank you so much, Justin, for spending time with us and sharing your valuable insight. We're really honored and lucky to have you. And thank you so much again.
Of course.
All right. See you, folks, and have a great weekend. Bye.